So we first start with scrap clay, and we are going to use only scrap clay for this because we are going to color it. So first make a ball out of your scrap clay that would be slightly larger than your cabochon mold, and I am using Let's Face It, and I chose one that has the eyes open because this is what we want to make her like looking upwards. And now I will show you how we can make a simple mold into a sculpture. So first of all, I'm going to cut a square out of the scrap clay on the thickest setting, and I will place this square on my acrylic block for ease of manipulation. And then with what is left of my clay ball, I create first a sausage, and then I flatten one of the ends in a slope. You have to flatten it in a slope. And then I am going also to cut in a slope the forehead, the top of the forehead, because if she's going to look upwards, then the forehead, the top of the forehead will be closer to the base than the rest. Then check to see if your slope is okay and if the whole cabochon rests on the flat, and you'll see that here it's not yet perfect, so I'm going to flatten it some more and extend the slope a bit, and then place it again. And then when placing it on the square, which is a lozenge, in fact, I am going to tilt her head a little bit to give it more natural movement. Now what we need to do is to conceal that juncture between the cabochon and the sausage. So I'm going to use first some ball stylus. Yes, I still didn't find that third one. I will find it one of these days. And I'm using not only that, this is just to do the brunt of it, but when it comes to this type of smoothing, I'm going to be very honest with you. What the sculpting tool that I trust the most is the side of my fingers, and especially of my thumb. And once you do the brunt of the joining of the seam there, then try, and you can actually practice with smoothing these kind of joints, but see, if you do it just gently like that, I had a small nick right there, but if you do it gently like that, then you should be able to smooth practically anything without any trace. Now I'm going to lift her chin a little bit because the cabochon had a little bit of a double chin, and also narrow her face just by simply squeezing a little bit on the bottom part of her cheeks. Now with the gentle pinching motion, we are going to change her nose. So first use that wax carving tool to bring up the bottom of the nose, then the rubber tipped tool to press on the sides of the nose. That is a tool that is exceptional to create that curve that the nose makes at the inner corner of the eyes. Yeah, as I said, the Let's Face It mold has more negroid features, so if you want a more Caucasian looking face, you'll have to change the nose. So again, just by pinching from the sides, I lift the nose and make it a more pointy tip, and I make it more narrow, both at the bridge of the nose and at the base of the nose. Don't worry about the nostrils. This is how we make the nostrils. Just insert the tip of the gum cleaner and gently pull outwards, and this is how your nostrils will be perfectly formed and looking very, very natural. Now let's talk the mouth. First of all, I'm going to open the mouth by simply cutting between the lips, and then I will bring down the upper lip gently because it's a little bit too thick. And you see, simply by inserting the tool and gently pressing upwards, I am opening the mouth, and then I will lift the lip a little bit and create a new lip shape. And the crease that's on the upper lip right under the nose, the one that forms the Cupid's bow. And now we have the shape of the upper lip, and we have to enhance a little bit the lower lip and get the mouth a little bit more closed, and then make her have just a hint of a smile. I'm just gently pressing the tip of the gum cleaner at the corners of the mouth. When you want to make a bigger smile, you just lift the tip a little bit upwards. Then before baking this, we need to make sure that it's still in a perfect lozenge form, so I'm going to use the cutter again. After which I will put it on wax paper and on a tile, and I will bake it for 45 minutes because I want it to be very well baked and sturdy. Now once it is all baked, we are going to place some flowers, and here you just make little balls of clay and you flatten them with your ball stylus. Place a little bit of bake and bond or liquid clay wherever you want to make the flower, and then as you flatten your little balls of clay, you form petals and you place them there so that each of them overlaps slightly the previous one, and then fix them in place with a smaller ball stylus simply by pressing down. It's more in a, if you want, in a gardenia pattern of petals, or the tiare flowers. Yes, we'll make a tiare flower one of these days because they are pretty. Now let's make a second flower, and on the center of that I'll show you how to make a pretty center. You just make a tiny ball of clay and you place it right there in the middle, and then you take your needle and you start teasing it. You just make all kinds of little pokes, some of it more deforming and some of them just straight down, until you get a center that's very textured, but with a very tiny texture, like that. You can make a few lines on the petals if you want with the tip of the needle. Now let's build a second flower with the same way, just with a little bit of, you cannot see it, but I have already some bake and bond there on the clay. And I forgot to say, don't worry too much about the sides of the face, about smoothing the join area between the sausage and the cabochon, because that's going to be hidden by the hair. So this will be the second flower, and then I'll show you on the third flower how to make the flower a little bit differently. And these flowers are very easy to make. You don't need to have any special knowledge to make them. It's preferable that you have a clay that is a little bit firmer, so if you use cernit, it's going to be a little bit of a problem because cernit doesn't stand up very good. And I did the same thing with the second center. Now for the third flower, I'm going to put the petals upside down compared to the way I put them on the other flowers. That is the concave part will be inside, the convex part will be up. And here you don't have to worry about them overlapping in any kind of order or fashion. But already with just this little trick, you have two different kinds of flowers on your pendant, just by placing those petals with the shape up or down. Then just make two little teardrops and place them there, and then make some veining with the tip of your needle. I'll show you on the third one. Just very, very gentle, and you don't have to make them in any kind of pattern, special pattern. It will just give more realism, if you want, and more character to the whole thing. Now we are pretty much done with the flowers. Let's start building the hair. And I will cut a piece of clay, kind of like U-shaped, with a little bit of fringes. And the fringes are just to give me a general idea about how I'm going to place the hair and provide a little bit of support on the hair strands. First, try it on. See how it fits, if the length is okay. See, I cut it a little bit too wide, but this should be pretty much it. That is good for a base for the hair. I'm cutting a slope at the very forehead so that it will not come like a baseball hat brim over her forehead, and then gently place some bacon bond or liquid clay on the sides and on the top of the forehead. Then place the piece of clay there and fix it really good around the head. And any excess on the top and on the sides, just trim it off. I find that the best to do this job is the rubber-tipped sculpting tool. And yes, essentially, if you want to do any kind of sculpting, I suggest that you get these three tools: the rubber-tipped tools, the wax carving tools, and that gum cleaner tool. That should be a total of about, I don't know, $15, $16 or so. I think that I placed all of them in my Amazon influencer store, so you can find them. Just be very careful on the rubber tipped tools to get a very small size, because they come in a lot of sizes and you don't want the large sizes, especially if you want to sculpt miniatures. So and as I said, I have a whole set. I think I have close to 3 dozen wax carving tools, but this is the tool that I use for sculpting. I use some of the other ones for other things, but then the rest are just a drawer filler. And yeah, so make sure that you flatten your piece of clay that will be the base for the hair very, very well against the head, both the forehead and the sides, and the bottom. That's the base for your pendant. And you can add a little bit of texture to it if you want. It will just make it easier for the hair to stick on. And you see, I'm trimming off all the excess. And believe me, I'm trying to stay as much as possible in the camera view, but sometimes it's hard for me to be able to see and to keep it under the camera. The disadvantages of a poor eyesight. Okay, so you see that I am doing the final touches with the, as I said, with the rubber tipped sculpting tool, and I'm also giving it a little bit of texture. And that texture will also help me when placing the hair strands. And now let's move on making the hair, and we just make a whole lot of little strings. Trying to get the camera to have the best view so you can see what I'm doing. Make some longer strings for the sides of the head, and then you'll need some shorter strings for her bangs. Try to make the longer strings meet in the middle as much as possible, and also make a few of them a little bit wavy to give it a more natural look. Now, part of the bangs, place them fairly normal going down, and then you can curve and lift a little bit the base. But then the other part, to give it a more natural wind rustled look, I'll show you how we'll place them. And flatten and texturize a little bit the hair strands. So again, what we are trying to do here is something that would look kind of metallic-ish. Of course, you can make this kind of pendant not at all antiqued the way I showed you. You can make it, for example, white, and you can make it look like alabaster, especially if you're using cernet. And actually, I got a fairly realistic look using souffle glue. Make it look like alabaster. If you mix a little bit of translucent, not a little bit more translucent in it, you can get a look that's almost as good as the cernet. Now let's place the other strands on the other side of the head and make them to cover a little bit some of the empty area on the pendant. And you see how I'm placing some of them a little bit wavier. Now, for the other half of the bangles, place the short strings upwards with the base right at the edge, and then stick them well into place, and then gently fold them down and bring them over. And again, give it a little bit of wavy, more natural look. You'll have to make quite a bit of strings, but the final result is always really, really pretty. And cover up the whole head with strings. And we'll do the same kind of ruffled, curly, wavy look for the top of her head. And you see I'm bringing her hair a little bit over that flower on the left. And definitely I did not want to fill that whole area of the pendant with hair, so I'm going to place, before anything else, I'm going to make a few more flower petals there to cover that corner. And I'm going to make a hair barrette. So just making first a flat strip, and then with little strips, I'm going to put little strips around it to give it almost the aspect of a tiara, if you want, of a little crown. And I will place it right above the bangs. And then gently taper trim the ends so it would look like it goes under the hair. And now let's make the hair on the top of the head. Make sure that you have all the sides covered. And then for the top we'll make some more shorter strings and use pretty much the same technique as for the bangs in the front. That is, place them going upwards first. And once again, go for a little bit of a tousled look. It makes everything look so much prettier. And once we are done with this and with placing those extra flower petals on that corner, see how I'm folding it over and giving it a little bit of a curly tousled look. So I was saying, as soon as we place those 2 extra flower petals on that corner, I'm going to put it back in the oven and I'm going to bake it for half an hour. Because even if the strings are fairly thin, remember that there is that sheet that's on the thickest setting that was the base for the hair, and you want everything to be perfectly baked and very hardy, very resistant. So again, I'm making some teardrop shaped petals that I will make some veining on with the tip of my needle. And you do that very, very gently. You don't have to leave deep imprints. Just a little bit on the surface of the clay. I lost it. There you go. Yeah, I told you, one of my main hands issues is that I drop things. Most of them I just edit out of the video, but I drop things a lot. Okay, so I'm pretty much ready to bake. Now, once it's baked and cooled, get some base for silver, for oxidized silver. If you haven't watched the video, I'll put a link in the description. There's a video on my website that shows you how to make the base for oxidized metal of any kind that you want to make a faux metal out of, because it's much easier to just put the metallicizer on top than to have to antique something that's already done. So I used the sponge from Donna Kato, and I'm going to cut a V-shaped base for my pendant, and I'm going to use that Makin's push mold that I showed you right a couple minutes ago, because it has some embellishments there, and part of that looks a little bit like wings, so that will enhance the fairy feeling of the whole pendant. So I'm gently cutting to follow the V shape of the pendant, and now I'm going to make my embellishments. So I'm only interested on that wing area of the corner of the Makin's push mold. This is the floral, but as you can see, it's got a bar embellishment and the corner embellishment as well. So gently cut the excess. Remember, this is not a silicone mold, it's pretty much plastic, so you'll have to be very careful when cutting the excess, but it can be cut without a problem. Just be patient. Generally, with polymer clay, if you want to make something really pretty, you have to be patient. It's not a total rule. Not everything that's pretty you have to spend hours on, but some of them you can spend hours on, but it's just more gratifying. And yes, you can actually make a series of these kind of pendants if you make everything in a line. I used to make this kind of stuff when I was selling at venues. Of course, I was making each of them different, but I could make up to 25, even 30 pendants a day like this. So it's not very hard once you get the hang of it. And then you see I trimmed nicely my push mold, and I'm going to place it so the base is on the second thickest setting, so that it will give you enough hardiness. And place the so-called wings, and then gently trim them. Push them in place except for the very tip, because we are going to put there some jump rings. And you see I got a gently a little bit of a slope right there at the base, and then just follow the shape of the edge of the wing. And then first cut following the wing edge on both sides, and then trim around the head. Remember, you're trying to imitate a plaque of metal put over a plaque of metal. This would be practically molded and strung metal. You have to think how the metal would be processed when done like this. The hair is not exactly filigree, but it's still strings of metal. And then just gently lift it and cut the back. I'm sorry, I'm trying to not have my hand in the view. See, now it's the precision trimming, where I'm following the feathers of the wings. And I debated a little bit if I wanted to do those cutouts, but I decided against, because I thought it might affect the hardiness of those wings as supports for the pendant. Now cut a slit at the end of the wing and insert the jump ring there, and make sure that you flatten that tip very well in place, and then you join both sides and just sculpt it back nicely, and do the same for the other wing. And before baking it, I'll show you a trick that makes it look exactly like a cast metal. As you can see, first I'm going to use alcohol and a paintbrush, a clean paintbrush, to smooth out everything. And as I said, usually metal, when it is cast, be it a sand casting mold or a more regular mold, it will have like pock marks on it. So what I'm doing, I'm taking ice cream maker salt. You can take rock salt, for example, and I'm going to sprinkle it over the wings, because that's going to be my oxidized silver area. And just sprinkle it all over, and then very gently tap it in place. And then when you take it out of the oven after it's baked, you just put it in water for a little bit, and that salt will dissolve, but it will leave those little marks that will make the faux metal look even more realistic. And now I baked it for half an hour. You can bake it for longer than that if you want. And I'm going to do a little bit of sanding. First of all, I'm going to use some 240 grit. I know that is a very low grit. I actually wondered if I didn't have to use the 150, but 240 did a great job. And I'm going to go on all those corners. Remember how many times I told you that it's much easier to fix something and to make a nice smooth edging with just sandpaper? instead of futzing around for an hour to do the edges properly with your X-Acto knife or blade. This is one of those examples, because 240 sandpaper will just bite into that polymer clay, and you'll be able to get a nice rounded edge very, very easily. I'm not going to sand where the two sheets join, because I want to leave that feeling of two sheets of metal hammered one on top of the other. So I'm using now on the very edges finer and finer sandpaper, and then I will use some 1000, a little bit on the face and on the top of the wings. I buffed the top of the wings and a little bit the face and the hair. Now I'm going to use the Frank Garcia and Artisan Powders and the Art Alchemy waxes. And I explain at the end of the video the list, and I'll put, as usual, links in the video description. Now first I'm going to use some Amethyst Magic that's in the Antique Brilliance over all the flowers. And then I'm going to change and make each of them a little bit different using other waxes. Now again, you don't have to do this. You can make your pendant looking entirely like one metal. You can make it look like alabaster. You can make it look like ivory. Yes, I will make a faux ivory tutorial soon as well. Now, I am adding a little bit of Royal Robes Opal Magic. That is a mildly pinkish violet iridescence wax. And I'm adding that on the two flowers that look like violets. Only on those two. Because as I said, I want to make them look slightly different. And then I'm adding a little bit of white gold on the flower that had the petals upside down. And then a little bit of vintage silk on the two flowers on the top. But I'm not going to leave them like that, because remember how by overlayering you can change the colors. Now I'm going to mix some Frank Garcia Artisan Powders, and that is the French Blue and the Vosseroux, that is a black, to obtain a darker blue, more like an ultramarine, even darker than that. But first I need a base. So I'm going to use the Turquoise Satin Opal Magic all over the head and the hair. So first I'm applying just a brunt layer of wax with the paintbrush, and then I will go back and I will thin out that layer to make it all even. After I place some wax all over the place, I'm making it all nice and even and in a nice layer all over the face, neck and hair area. And then with the soft dry paintbrush I'm going to start applying the powder. Now what's going to happen, the wax will trap that powder, and as it hardens, some of the powder will stay in, not all of it, and you might get your fingers a little bit stained for a while, but that's fine, it can be cleaned. So after you apply the powder all over the place, you let the whole thing sit for like 10-15 minutes for the wax that's underneath to have time to harden. After that, clean your brush and then gently brush out whatever is left over. As I said, there will still be some powder that will be coming off on your fingers. That's fine. For a while it will be no problem. we will fix the remaining powder in place in a little bit. Now I'm going to apply more of the royal robes and then a little bit of white gold from the metallic line, and then I will pretty much be done with the flowers. Next, I am applying blue velvet opal magic all over the area of the face and hair. Now the blue velvet has a slightly violet hue. The turquoise satin is perfectly blue. And then I'm going to apply more turquoise satin on the face because I want the face to be a lighter blue than the hair, and I also want the top of the face to be even lighter. So I'm going to create a little bit of an iridescence effect that will go from more violet blue towards a greenish blue as it goes from the edges towards the top area of her face. And you see, I'm just, after I applied the waxes, I'm just nicely burnishing, pretty much burnishing them in with a paintbrush. And remember, it's always very important between colors, clean your paintbrush very well by rubbing it on alcohol moistened paper towel. And after I do all this, I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. And see, clean your paintbrush really, 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 really good. And then take a little bit of the emerald brocade, green brocade, sorry, and that's from the opal magic line, and place some just on the top. Then clean the paintbrush and then burnish it in. You don't want to have a whole lot of it. You just want to give it a slightly lighter, more greenish hue in that area. And see, I'm doing just the top and a little bit on the top of her head and on the bangs, not bangles, I'm sorry. And just do a nice mixing on all that. I'm applying more blue velvet, the one that's got slight violet hues on the very base of the hair. And then gently blending everything so there wouldn't be any kind of color line between the different hues that I have applied there. As I said, to obtain a purplish violet towards greenish blue, purplish blue towards greenish blue. Then I applied the silver on the silver parts and on the back, on the wings and on the back, and don't forget the sides. And let it harden for a while, then slightly buff it, and then apply some PYM2 on the front, because I want to make sure, see, the thing is that there will still be some of that powder in between the hairs and all that that might not be trapped by the wax, and you don't want that to come off as you're wearing the pendant or whoever's wearing the pendant. So I first buff it to give it a little bit of shine, because I don't want it, the unshiny parts, to be caught under the PYM2. But I will apply the PYM2 only on the front and practically focused on the face. And after that is cured, which usually takes about half an hour, then I will enhance a little bit that effect that I already told you about with the green brocade on the top of her face and the blue velvet on the bottom of the hair. And I will also enhance that little crown I made with some rose gold and white gold. The base of the crown, rose gold, and those little strips with white gold. As I said, you see, I put some green brocade on her face, and I'm putting some blue velvet at the base of the hair, and of course on the neck itself. And just a touch more of the royal robes and white gold on the flowers. And as I said, the touch of rose gold and white gold on the little crown. And more silver, definitely more silver on the wings and on the back. But again, as I said, you don't have to use all these waxes and powders and stuff. You can make it way simpler. So more silver, and this is the old silver of the metallic line. And don't forget the edges. And now we just wait for it to harden at about 15-20 minutes, and then you buff it with a soft cotton cloth. And this is how it will look. The blue fairy. And as usual, you see that the silver, the faux silver, looks exactly like antique silver. So enjoy making a fairy sculpted pendant. Happy claying!